Okay, thanks for joining us for our conversation with two highly placed officials with the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. We're going to be speaking today with Michael Poliakoff, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of ACTA, as well as Emily Koons, who's a Vice President there, Vice President of Development and Philanthropy, Emily?
That's correct.
And we are interested in seeing what they might have to say about what's going on in higher education, including what some have termed the donor revolt in the wake of what happened on October 7th, actually. So why don't I just let you start, Michael, first by telling us about ACTA. What is it? And maybe a little bit about its history and mission.
Thank you so much for having us, and I'm delighted to share thoughts and to hear yours. ACTA's mission is to work with trustees and philanthropists and alumni and donors and the public to affect positive, lasting change. What we want to restore is vibrant intellectual exchange on campus, high academic standards that are based on merit, and strict financial accountability. We were founded in 1995, and one of my longtime colleagues says that she'd like to hang a banner outside our window on M Street saying, "We told you so." But that's not really our job now. Our job is to affect those absolutely crucial changes. The warning lights have been flashing for a long time. Not everyone was willing to look at those warning lights, but now they have become so bright that they're much harder to ignore, and that can only be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And just before I ask you questions, on the basis of your answers, how did you get there, Michael? What did you do for fun before your ACTA chapter?
I was a professor of classical studies who never thought of doing anything else from my undergraduate education on. And I still teach in the evenings at George Mason University. I think I owe that to my teachers. But after founding the classics department at Hillsdale College, a moment in my life that I'm very, very proud of, I became more and more concerned about what was happening all over the country. So I moved first to the National Endowment for the Humanities when Lynn Cheney was the chair, and then into academic administration. I had the privilege and honor of working as Deputy Secretary of Education in Pennsylvania during Governor Ridge's administration, worked as a Vice President for Hank Brown in Colorado, and then it was time to come home to ACTA in 2010. And this is the longest I've ever been in one place. And I'm telling my colleagues that as long as I stay healthy, I plan to be there for at least another decade.
Oh, great. Okay. Are you ready for that, Emily? Are you ready for that decade? Or why don't you tell us about how you got there?
Sure. So I've been at ACTA now for almost 5 years, working in higher ed reform for about 15. So, of course, I knew about ACTA and their great work, and I'd actually met Michael at an event maybe a decade ago at this point. But feel really fortunate to have landed here. I had a former colleague who was at ACTA, and I wasn't looking for a job at the time, but he told me, if I don't send you this job description, I think you'll be furious with me. And I would have been. So he sent me a position for an opening in the Fund for Academic Renewal, which is a terrific program that ACTA conducts, and it advises higher education donors on their giving. So we have a guide that we produce called the Intelligent Donor's Guide to College Giving. And the ethos behind that is that we think that targeted, directed giving can make a big difference in higher education. We want to encourage donors to stop writing to blank checks, to take a careful look at their alma mater, and to think really thoughtfully about their giving and how they can target it so that it goes towards the things that they support and that they hold dear, and doesn't fund the kind of things that go against their values. Mm-hmm. So I was in that position for about 4 years, and then this past August made the transition to Vice President of Development. So I'm still working with donors, although in a different capacity, which has confused all of my relatives that I'm in a different role. But it's been a real pleasure to be here at ACTA doing work that I think is so important with people that I respect as much as Michael and my colleagues.
Yeah. So now let's I'm going to call this a hypothetical, but I feel it's probably not. Let's go to October 1, pre-October 7th. If I were, hypothetically, an impatient donor, impatient with the pace or lack of progress or even, negative developments in the reform of higher education, would I have been wrong? Well, what would you have said, both of you, to me on October 1 if I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. Doesn't seem as if we're effecting any reform or making any progress. Would that have been unreasonable?
I think it would have been an exaggeration. It would have been a very limited viewpoint because some good things were happening. The Board of Trustees of UNC Chapel Hill had adopted the Calvin Committee report. They took that black eye from the US Supreme Court and said no more. And not only are we going to stop our race-based admissions, but we're going to extend that to faculty hires and to contracting. And they accelerated the development of an independent school for civic life and leadership with its own hiring authority to bring intellectual diversity to the campus. And that is not an isolated moment. ACTA's Campus Freedom Initiative has won something on every campus that we have touched. Getting the Chicago principles adopted at University of Texas, Austin, after delays of many years. Suddenly, with that pressure of social media and op-eds, things happened. Cornell and Stanford and Ohio State University. In each place, it hasn't been a complete victory where we've got much more to do, but things have changed for the better. Our campus debate and discourse program has now held over 200 campus debates, habituating students to take up topics like Confederate monuments, assault weapons, LGBTQ, and to have civil parliamentary debates on topics that would often get their faculty hurling insults, if not more, at each other. And I like to think of them in some ways educating their radical faculty that speech is not violence. Speech is the element of persuasion in a free society. So these very good things have been happening. We've had the honor of working with Senator Jerry Serino in Ohio, who obtained funding for 5 new independent centers for civic education. And then, of course, I need to turn this over to Emily in a moment for the FAR clients. But I want to tag one other moment. On our board of directors is Paul Levy, who, in protest of the way Penn was treating Amy Wax, resigned loudly, publicly, and eloquently in the Wall Street Journal from the Board of Trustees. And he has not given up his campaign for freedom of speech. So we've got the paradigms out there, but you're quite right. As we get to October 7 and even more so October 8, we are seeing an enormous change. But Emily, we should talk more about what FAR has done.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that too. I think I would tell that donor that the challenges to reform are real, they're formidable, but also that higher education is too important to our society to abandon. I think we've seen, unlike Vegas, what happens on college campuses doesn't stay there, that this illiberal ideology that we've seen take over workplaces, government, you name it, that started on college campuses. So I would encourage donors to not give up on reform efforts, because I think we can't simply walk away from higher education. I would ask donors, if they're frustrated with what they're seeing on campus, to stop giving to their alma mater. I think I've seen too many donors who express frustration about higher education, but say, but my alma mater is okay and I'm still giving in the way that I always did. So those are the donors that I would kind of want to encourage to, maybe walk away, as we'll talk about in a minute, as some of the Penn and Harvard donors did, and really make a statement with that.
Yep. And
yeah, just to kind of add to what Michael said, I do think that donors can play a tremendous role in directing their funds towards good things on campus. So we've identified about 90, we call oases of excellence. So these are these really excellent campus centers that are upholding, great books education, teaching about free market economics and entrepreneurship, and providing a real kind of counter to the prevailing campus culture. And we've seen these be really successful. So I'd encourage donors to kind of look for those bright spots, fund the good on campus, but to stop writing those blank checks.
Mhm.
And if I could add one other resource, I think we're now, Emily, in the 3rd edition of the Intelligent Donors Guide. And this advice really ought to be in the DNA of every philanthropist. Look under the hood. Don't assume that what you experienced decades ago is still the case on campus. And prime directive, this is your money. I'll give an anecdote. When I was at University of Colorado, a very generous funder gave me the resources to redesign freshman orientation, to bring in a certain great books approach. And one highly placed official really became quite prickly and said, "That's not the way it works around here. People give us money and we decide what to do with it."
Yeah.
Wrong. Absolutely wrong. And we want to be part of that change.